What's going on, y'all? Shout out to the LDBC. It's your boy Fight Critic here to give you guys a revival of the Sunday SuckaPunch Podcast. I'm basically going V2. This, for me, I think, for the most part, is just a way better way for me to give you guys content. But also, it kind of puts me on a direct schedule simply because I think earlier this week I did a video and just Monday through Wednesday is a weird part of YouTube that you just don't see. You don't really have a bunch of people unless like you have like a large subscriber base where you could put out content on a day that doesn't really like work well with the algorithm. You can probably get away with it, but I think for me Sundays are pretty good because we've been getting a lot of fights, so it gives me a reason to put a lot of fights on. But I also think if there aren't any fights, then I get to focus on putting out, an episode where I go through a lot more of the documentary stuff that I'm doing. Because I still got a lot of documentary videos with like Golden Boy, a lot of documentary videos talking about other, things that people have requested. So I think that's a great way for me to do it. But because we had some weekend fights that were kind of important to the sport, it's a great way for me to give you guys some recaps. But first and foremost, I hope everybody's doing well. There's been a lot going on, at least I could say, here in the United States. And more importantly, I wanted to just address this because I felt like it was important to address it. And what I'm going to talk about is what just happened this week with everything that's been going on with a lot of the shootings that have happened. Of course, Derek Chauvin is currently on trial facing, I believe he's facing either manslaughter charges or second degree murder charges or even first degree murder charges. He's facing some combination of those charges for the death of George Floyd. Of course, the death of George Floyd took place last year around this time. It's a very, very traumatic part of the year for the country. And regardless of how you feel about the George Floyd situation, regardless of what side that you're going to be on, I think we can all agree that there's an inherently a problem not only with the United States around weapons, but there's a huge problem with police. And even for the sake of whenever you bring up things such as police brutality, a lot of people like to counter with whataboutism. So they talk about Chicago. They talk about, the rate in which African Americans kill each other with violence. And ultimately, the one aspect to things that not a lot of people tend to pay attention to is that, yes, black on black crime is a very sad and fucked up thing. You know what's also sad and fucked up? White on white crime, Asian on Asian crime, Latino on Latino crime. But the problem is that we don't talk about these things. And the reason why we don't talk about these things is because we have inherently known that those crimes are a result of the environment that those individuals are. So when you look at things like statistics of white on white crime, Asian on Asian crime, Latino on Latino crime, and black on black crime, the numbers are really high in comparisons to the other ethnicities or race of other people who commit those murders. However, when you talk about police brutality and you talk about the long history of what police in this country were founded to do, there's so many glaring things that are wrong in this country. The police in general in the United States dates back to slave masters. Not in the sense of me calling police themselves slave masters, but in the sense of whenever slave masters were having issues with, their slaves, or if their slaves ran away, there would be patrol that would go and get these people. And that is where fundamentally where the idea of having a sheriff was developed upon. And then it kind of expanded and expanded towards the federal level and the state level and so on and so forth, which is what gives you your modern day version of policing. There's also another aspect too that a lot of people tend to forget is that the police department, they are the servants of the public. They are not private citizens. They are individuals who serve the public. Yes, there are a lot of things that they are protected against. That is a big problem. Like Immunity. I don't believe police officers should have immunity. If you do something wrong in your job, you should be fired or held accountable for it. If I do something wrong in my job, I'm held accountable for it. If I do it again, I get fired. You know, if somebody else who's a public servant, like whether they work in housing or whether they work in the medical field, if they do something wrong, they will lose their job. It doesn't need 300 or 400 complaints. We have seen police officers who have had a long history of issues not lose their jobs. And then they find themselves in these type of situations where they obviously make the wrong decision, and then you have so many people who are rushing to their defense. And my biggest problem with it is that you wouldn't be rushing to the defense of the victims for having a long history of crime. So why would you be rushing to the defense of police officers who have a long history of misconduct? So yeah, we have inherently a really fucked up problem with police in this country. It shouldn't be as easy as it is to become a police officer, in my opinion. Now, I've got friends of mine who are, not necessarily in law enforcement, but they've thought about joining law enforcement. And I have a couple of friends of mine who are in law enforcement. They don't do any law enforcement here in New York, which I'm actually very happy about, because ultimately I can't interact with you when you are wearing that, uniform. I'll interact with you when you don't have the uniform on, because I know that you're not on your job, essentially. But when you think about aspects to the police department and what the requirements are, it's much harder in this country to get a co-op than it is to become a police officer once you're in front of the process. What makes being a police officer really hard is the fact that you basically have to go against a lot of other fucking people who want to be police officers, where you don't really need much behind it except to pass, a couple different evaluations. And even then, I think those evaluations are not as strenuous as possible. Whereas if you were to go and try to get a co-op, there's such a long and strenuous approval process just when you're put in front of it, and you need a large amount of capital to just be in a position to be actually getting the approval. With a police officer, it's much different. You just have to pass an exam and be in the top percentile of it. And then you have to pass a physical. You have to pass a psychological evaluation. And in many of those times, we don't even see much of many police departments actually go through that process. A lot of the times, these are just individuals who have worked a long period of time in their communities because they're from there and they become police officers. And one of the biggest problems that I have with the police today is a large percentage of them don't live in the communities that they are actually stationed in. And if that was the case, you would see, in my opinion, less and less issues with people who have a problem with the police in their communities. When people exist in that community, they exist so that they can help other people. They exist so that they can provide money to businesses in the area. But when a police officer exists in there and they don't fucking know you, that's a problem to them. It's no different from somebody who moves in 30 people that people don't know and they're trying to tell them what to do. It's no different from that. And for a lot of these people, it creates a lot of uneasy tension with them because they know you're there to do a job. You don't give a fuck about them. Whereas if you had police officers, and even for me, I think one of the biggest things I've told to a lot of people who I've had discussions with this about is if you forced every new police officer to live in the actual community, they should live no more than a 10-minute walk from the precinct, from where they're actually going to be stationed, I think you would see a lot better of a reaction between people in their community and the police. Because that's how it kind of used to be, in certain areas. And I'm not saying that back then things were all gravy, but no, there's no sense of understanding. And then you get situations like Anthony Thomas, this 17-year-old kid who got into a scuffle with a police officer, and the police officer ended up getting shot. And the media ran with this story that it was him who had this weapon and he shot the police officer. And then a couple days later, the police officer's colleague was just like, nah, he didn't have a weapon on him. The police officer shot himself. And we don't hear about it the same way that we heard about it previously. You have this kid, this 13-year-old kid in Chicago. I don't give a fuck if this kid had a weapon or not, personally. He did not put this police officer's life in danger. And regardless if this kid was going about the way he needed to feel that he needed to be safe enough, and whether or not he ran from the police officer or resisted arrest, what people are failing to realize is that there are charges for actually resisting arrest. They don't exist with being the executioner. This kid didn't have a deadly weapon in his possession that could have basically put the police officer's life at risk. And even if he did, he's not on camera actually using it. And one of the biggest problems that I have is when it comes to this whole idea about people being pro-gun and being pro-gun and being pro-gun. And this situation just happened with the Dante Wright situation, in which I saw a tweet about a dude who talked about, oh, this is the Dante Wright that the media wants to show you, where they show a picture of him and his daughter, and then he shows up a picture right next to it of Dante basically waving a gun in a photo, and he's like, but this is the real Dante that they don't want to show you. So the fuck what? Since when was being pro-gun based on your race? Because that's what it sounds like. It mostly just sounds like to me that you are not willing to accept that there are black people that are pro-gun. I'm sorry. There are. And it's always whenever black people choose to actually look into the history and the laws of doing things in this country that it becomes a problem. In California in the 70s and 80s, you had the Panthers who exercised their Second Amendment rights. And it was the only fucking time in history that you saw Republican lawmakers and the NRA advocate for gun control, because it was black people with weapons. But suddenly, this kid, who was reported to the FBI, goes into a FedEx facility in Indianapolis and kills specifically people of the Sikh community. I'm sorry if I'm saying Sikh wrong. It's just something that, in my opinion, in the way I'm talking, I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. This kid was reported to the Federal Bureau of Investigation by his own parents. And the FBI was just like, we'll just take away his gun. Not realizing that there is so many convenient ways to get guns in Indianapolis and Indiana in general. Want to know why there's such an influx in guns in Chicago, one of the states with some of the harshest gun control laws? Indiana. Want to know why you had situations in Wisconsin with Kyle Rittenhouse? Guess what? You have all these neighboring states that allow you to get weapons at such a high rate. And in the end, it does nothing but make this worse. We have a gun problem in this country. I shouldn't see people who are spending 5, 10, 20 years trying to become citizens in this country, that have squeaky clean records, that have never broken any laws in this country, go through such a more diligent process than somebody who doesn't even need to do most of any real evaluation to get a weapon. This kid got investigated by the FBI, had his gun taken, and then went out and got another gun. Like it was nothing. Like they basically just took away his fucking Xbox from him. And he just went out and just got another Xbox. Like it was nothing. Cool, take it away. I'm gonna go get another one. I'm gonna go to Walmart, get another one. But then you got this 13-year-old kid, and you got Dante Wright, and they have weapons, and suddenly it's, oh, see, they've got a weapon. Suddenly you're not pro-gun. That's a problem. And for the people who advocate for gun laws, especially the ones who aren't white, you got to speak up just as much. Look, I'm not some person that's going to harpoon against the Second Amendment. I think the Second Amendment has some value. I think it has a lot more value than what people are actually thinking about. But I think you need to put a lot of restrictions behind it. There's no way you can make voting so difficult in this country, but make guns so easy to attain. When voting and guns, and you look at the implications on it, you want people to actively vote. You want that to happen. You shouldn't make it harder for people to vote. You should make it harder for people to get guns. Because ultimately, voting is not going to kill people. You know what it is? Shooting people is going to. You know? So that's what I wanted to take at least the first part of this podcast to actually talk about. And you know, I'm praying for a lot of these families, and I'm not really a religious person as I used to be when I was younger. And I feel like I need to because these people need hope. And it's fucked up. And truthfully, I kind of agree with Chris Cuomo. And he says that if these were white children this was happening to, you would see gun reform. You would see people bringing bills in front of their lawmakers. But it's not. And that's the fucked up part about it. And I hate the fact that I got to think about it in that lens. That I have to calculate what would happen to kids who were white. And if this happened to them. I hate the idea I have to actually factor that in. Because of this situation. And the mass shootings that have been happening. That have been targeting people. All right, so let's move right along. Let's talk about what we got into this week. This week, of course, when the headlines is not being dominated by sports, the headlines is also being dominated by this continued massive amount of back and forth between Joshua and Fury in the public eye. I'm not going to, talk or speculate on what will happen with this situation because ultimately I feel like there's so many moving parts to it and I can't keep up with one side. I can't keep up with who's actually being logical or who's being, 100% truthful to it. I believe both sides are bullshitting each other for the sake of trying to see how far they can stretch this. That's ultimately how I feel about it. But one of the things that really bothered me, and I didn't talk about this, was the idea of Tyson Fury putting a deadline on Joshua, trying to make him a fight. I don't give a fuck about that shit. Talking about, oh, you have a deadline to do this, you have a deadline to do that. Dude, nobody gives a fuck when you're going to stand to make a shit ton of money about a deadline. Let's just be fucking honest about it. Having a deadline is bullshit. This idea that fighters put each other's on deadline. I thought it was bullshit when Manny Pacquiao and Bob Arum was doing this shit. I thought it was bullshit when Floyd used to put all his polls up. I always think it's bullshit. The only deadlines that really fucking matter in this sport is purse bids. That's what matters. Want to know why? Because ultimately, when shit doesn't happen, the organization is like, hey, yeah, I got a purse bid now. That's what happens. But when fighters are just like, oh, if he doesn't give me this fight by this time, then, oh, something's going to happen. No, shut the fuck up. Like, it's stupid. Now, what I thought was really interesting, though, was this idea about offers. And there was a lot of conversation. Joshua said that they sent Tyson Fury a formal offer for their fight. And to me, I'm not going to discuss the particulars of the offer. Excuse me while I shut this window. Somebody's going through trash. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about the particulars of the offers. And the big reason why I'm not going to talk about particulars of the offers is nobody really fucking knows what's in this offer. So I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to say on some like, oh, I have sources and this and that. Nobody really knows. If you know something, good for you. If you're putting out that content and if you feel like you got sources that are doing it, yo, all the best to you. Me personally, I'm not going to do it personally. But the only thing that I found very fucking peculiar about Joshua sending Fury an offer is, wasn't it last fucking year that we thought that they had an offer agreed to and that they were going to do this 50-50? Why are we still talking about offers? If last year we know that both sides had agreed to a deal and that both sides were going to split things evenly. Why are we now in fucking April, almost a year later, talking about offers? That doesn't make sense. How does two guys who agreed to a fight almost a year ago, and they say, yep, everything's signed and official. We're both going to split the revenue and everything and the proceeds down the middle. Both guys get what they want. They get the offer that we want. We're just trying to put a price tag on everything. And now I'm hearing that you're offering the fight. That doesn't make sense. And it sends so much misinformation because you got guys like John Fury and you got David Haye and Frank Warren. And you got them saying, yo, we probably won't see this fight until the fall. And then you got people on Hearn's side that are saying, yo, we're trying to make this fight as early as possible. Like, The only thing coming out of this that makes actual sense to me is I don't believe this fight happens in the summertime. And the only reason why I'm saying that this fight probably won't happen in the summertime, and I know I said I won't speculate, is because Joshua's trainer has to train the English team for the Olympics. And unless the Olympics doesn't happen, I don't see this fight happening in the summer. I'm just saying. So as this miscommunication like continues and you have more misinformation and you got guys going to the media and talking about this and talking about that, you got Fury doing his best and Joshua both doing their best to try to get in each other's heads. Like, dog, this is being dragged out and it is just it's really really irritating me. It's irritating me on the same level of a Mayweather Pacquiao. It's just like, yo, if the fight's done, just say it's fucking done and then just shut the fuck up and go on the press tour and save all this shit for the press tour. But every fucking day, I gotta hear about one side saying one thing and one side saying another thing. Yo, it's just fucking annoying, especially to me. And I know a lot of people, this gotta be annoying to you. Even if you are a fan of both these guys and you think that this fight is the best thing since sliced bread, this has to be infuriating for you as a fan because you don't actually know if these guys are gonna fight. So yes, I'm really annoyed with this entire thing. And for the sake of the fans, we already know this fight isn't for the fans. And I know I'm gonna eventually have to talk about that, but yeah, this fight really isn't for the fans. And if you think that this fight is for the fans, I honestly I invite you to actually study economics before you come to that conclusion. There are more low level tier fights that are actually for the fans than a lot of these high level fights. And this is one of those examples of a fight that is being broadcast to you and that is being put in front of you as a fight for the fans. But the reality is the audience, the people, the revenue, the way the prices are going to be set up, it doesn't mean any fucking thing for the fans. This is about making money. So we'll see what happens as things kind of progress. I'm not really saying we're going to see much movement until after May when this arbitration situation gets handled. But until then, we'll continue to see these articles about guys going back and forth. Cool. Let's go ahead and let's move on to these weekend fights. We had a pretty busy boxing weekend. Regis Prograis got a technical decision against Ivan Redkach. Did Redkach sell the low blow? I think he did his best to do his best Amir Khan / Zab Judah impression. Regis Prograis is a very good body puncher, and a lot of people tend to feel as though a lot of the shots that he tends to throw tends to be a little bit lower than what they would like to see. But Prograis is just naturally a body puncher. He's not a fucking Abner Mares who has literally thrown dick punches in the past. But Regis is he's a very good fighter for his weight class. And I think there's many elements to him that are underrated. And I don't think that people should be writing him off just because he lost to Josh Taylor, who's another really good fighter in my opinion. But I think for a guy like Prograis, this was probably not the kind of decision that he wanted, just given the amount of momentum and the fact that, he has a lot of other guys and names in the sport that he wants to fight. And realistically, he kind of transitions pretty well to the welterweight division because he's a really big junior welterweight. So I think mostly for Prograis, I think the biggest thing that he should be focusing on is just getting back into the ring. Because the one thing about what a lot of people, especially in the sport of boxing, is they will always hold what your last fight is, either for you or against you. And because he's not happy with this fight, he needs to be able to get another fight that will make things better. But I thought he fought, pretty good for the most part. I've never really tooted Ivan Redkach to be some type of really huge world beater, in my opinion. But Redkach is a very good opponent for a lot of guys who are either looking to step up or stay busy. And for Prograis, it was a stay busy for him because Prograis has won a world title. He's fought in the unification. He's fought a lot of other top 5 fighters. So this is a natural fight for him to stay busy. And I think the next thing for him is, I think he should probably be in line to get, the loser of the Taylor versus Ramirez fight, the unification fight. If he doesn't get the loser, he should get the winner. I think Pereira's, if you look at how that division is lining up, whoever wins the undisputed junior welterweight title, Pereira should be the next guy in line to be like, yo, it's my turn to get my shot. And I don't want any of those guys to feel that they're above him, in my opinion. I think that you should look at, whether it's Taylor, solidifying a rematch or Jose Ramirez fighting uh, a Regis Prograis. I think that should be the natural transition to ways. But another fight that really didn't give us much clarity was Tony Harrison fighting Brian Pereira. Oh, I mean, I think Tony Harrison got away with one, even though it was a draw. And this has kind of been something that's kind of been a knack lately for Tony Harrison, and I hate that I have to say it like that because Tony Harrison is a good fighter. Granted, he doesn't have the type of chin that you would want as a fighter, but he has a lot of tools to kind of mask, his ability to get chin checked a lot. And for Brian Pereira, he was just there to try to play spoiler. There was nothing really built up that people felt that he was just this massive betting favorite or that he was going to, jump levels because he can beat Tony Harrison. I'm pretty sure 90% of the people who going into this fight felt that this was a fight for Harrison to kind of, shake off some ring rust and kind of, let the other guys at the top of the division know that he's still a formidable opponent. But Pereira fought very well, and I thought he won the fight personally. I scored at 7-5. I could see 6-6, but I couldn't find a way to give Tony Harrison 7 rounds. I thought Pereira's game plan was amazing. I thought that he kept Tony Harrison from having to be able to utilize his movement and being able to land punches in different angles, which is what Harrison has a tendency to do. The one thing about Harrison is as he's gotten more mature as a fighter is he's admiring less of his work, which is what he used to do, a couple years ago. But for Pereira was just trying to be spoiler, and he was, in my opinion. And I felt that he fought the type of fight that I think he did everything perfect. And I think for Tony Harrison, he didn't do enough. And that's just how I feel about it. But the biggest fight in terms of what actually makes sense for boxing was Demetrius Andrade fighting against Liam Williams. Now, don't get me wrong when I say this. It's just something I've always realized. British boxing fans, I know you guys love your fighters, but you guys need to be realistic at times. There was nothing about Liam Williams that was going to beat Demetrius Andrade. I don't know who told you that Liam Williams could beat Demetrius Andrade. I don't know who gave you the bright idea that a man that could not beat Liam Smith was going to beat Demetrius Andrade. Sorry. And I hate whenever we put English fighters and American fighters in fights. British boxing fans they think that Jeff Lacey is like the standard of American fighters. And I don't get it. It's like anytime you see like a fight like this or a really big fight between a British and an American, it's like, oh, Jeff Lacey. It's like your brains are immediately like rooted to just be like, yeah, Jeff Lacey. Like, dog, not every American fighter is Jeff Lacey. Like, let's be honest. Like, that fight is from like 2006? Dude, like, it's time to move on. You guys look absolutely fucking ridiculous when you guys were making the same comparisons when Kell Brook fought against Errol Spence. Oh, Jeff Lacey. Dude, not every British fighter is a Joe Calzaghe. And Liam Williams damn sure ain't no Joe Calzaghe. But for some reason, a lot of the UK and or British fans, they like to just make the Jeff Lacey comparison. Like, I don't get it. Where I feel like that's like a fight that a lot of people from Britain or the Greater Britain area, they hold that fight as if it's like religion to them, as if like this is the way things are supposed to be. But it wasn't gonna happen against Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade outboxed Liam Williams, dropped him early in the fight. Had a little bit of a scare late in the fight, but nothing too crazy. And continued to just fight guys. Now, Demetrius Andrade, in my opinion, uh, I think he's one of the most unfulfilling fighters that we have been witness to. And not in a sense of unfulfilling that we feel that he's not tapped into his potential, because I think he's fully tapped into his potential. But it almost seems like every hand he's been dealt is just fucked. And I hate that I have to actually like take such a solid and, consistent win for him and shit on it. I hate that I have to do it, but I mostly have to do it because I remember a year ago, or maybe even like close to 2 years ago, and DAZN had every single title in the middleweight division in their product. You had every single title in your product. And there was no excuses that you could not make an undisputed middleweight champion. It'd be the first time since Jermaine Taylor was the last guy in the division. And before that, you had a long history of Bernard Hopkins being undisputed middleweight champion. And you guys tried. Like, you tried. You tried. You got Canelo and Danny Jacobs to unify, but that was it. Billy Joe Saunders practically backed out of Demetrius Andrade for a vacant title, chose to move up in weight. Then you got situations where the WBA and you have essentially another top-ranked fighter now, Ryota Murata, being the full-time champion. And then, in ways, I really blamed the WBC for this, because you also had Canelo, who was, champion for both the WBC and IBF. And you gave him some little Mickey Mouse title so that he could go into another division, fight another champion, because he was going to cut you a check. And then that title, gets pretty much handed off to Jamal Charlo. It's almost like it's really fucked up, because I think for Demetrius Andrade, I think he was doing what he felt was best in his career, which was all the guys that can give me a unification fight are with this, platform. And I should be on this platform to get guys like Billy Joe Saunders, Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin, and so on and so forth. And he hasn't gotten any of those guys. Those guys look at him and they look at his title and they're just like, don't do nothing for me. And the realization to it that he's figuring out is that he's noticing how much he's going to have to spend shelling out in terms of he's got to overpay these guys to get in the ring with him. And my thing is that you waited till now to figure this out? Like, you could have figured that out a long time ago, even before you went up to middleweight. The minute you are having struggling opportunities to fight at 154 pounds was when you should have realized that, cool, if I'm going to sign with a platform that has all these guys, I need to put pressure on the guy running the show to be like, hey, I want you to actually pay these guys a shit ton of money so that they can fight me, because I know I can beat them. And I know if I beat them in front of their fans, that will make their fans want to actually get behind me. And that tends to happen in boxing a lot of times. A guy goes into a perfect opportunity, he's relatively unknown, or he doesn't have a high fan base, and he fights a guy with a fan base, and he beats that guy, and he's able to take away some of those fans. And that's how it happens. And I think he's aware of it. I just think he realizes it too late. And it sucks. It really sucks, because for a guy like Demetrius Andrade, as much money as you made, you have not made the consistent jumps that we've wanted to see out of a guy who is as talented as you. There are so many guys that would be dying for the opportunity to have the talent that Demetrius Andrade has. And each and every time, these other guys in the division, they make excuses not to fight you. And it hurts me that you're waiting till now to figure this out. That you're understanding why these guys don't have any incentive to fight you. And if they did have the incentive to fight you and you realized it much sooner, I think you could have gotten those guys in the ring by basically overpaying them. But no, you're stuck fighting the Liam Williams of the fucking world. Sucks. It really does sucks. But, all right. Jake Paul, Ben Askren. I'm not going to blame boxing on this one. I'm not going to blame Triller on this one. Frankly, I'm not even going to blame Jake Paul on this one. All of this entire thing, this massive fuck up, this is all on Ben Askren. And I know Ben Askren has had a rough, year and a half where he got absolutely demolished by Jose Masvidal, and record timing, got a knee to a face in the opening seconds of a fight and then got absolutely put to sleep. Ben Askren is a fucking finesser, bro. That's the only way I could put it. He is a finesser. There is no way you could tell me that you, Ben Askren, a mixed martial artist with over a decade of competitive combat fighting that involves throwing punches, that for these fights where you are fighting other combat fighters, that you have a striking coach, and you come out and look like that? Nah, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that Jake Paul was just that much better than you. I'm not. It's bullshit. And not only for you to come in the shape that you came in, but the fact that you walked out of that ring with a fucking smile on your face, as if nothing mattered in the world. Yes, this was absolutely rigged. Ben Askren was not there to fight. He was there to lay down like a bitch. And that's what he did. He laid down like a bitch. I'm sorry. If you're a mixed martial arts fan and you're a Ben Askren fan, dog, drop that nigga. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's sorry. He he hoodwinked you. He bamboozled you. He led you astray. He run amok over you. He did every one of them Stephen A. Smiths, dumb things. But because Ben Askren is not a fighter, bro. I don't consider him as a fighter. And you know how like MMA fighters, not even MMA fighters, not MMA fighters, but you know how like certain people who are fans of mixed martial arts and they talk about like, yo, but in a street fight and then this and that. I'm sorry, but if I see Ben Askren in the street and we got a problem, you know what? I think I could take him. After this, I think I could take him. I'm gonna just follow the Jake Paul blueprint. But in terms of like this is not a bad look for boxing, in my opinion. I'm just being honest about it. This isn't a bad look. Jake Paul versus Ben Askren does nothing to affect the landscape of boxing in terms of the fighters and champions. They don't. Jake Paul is never going to fight an active professional fighter. Why? Because he would get put in a stretcher. It's that simple. And Ben Askren, a guy who has more than a decade of actual combat experience, this makes MMA look bad. I'm sorry. Because here's the thing. There have been plenty of guys who have ventured into the other side of the sport, mixed martial arts. Chris Algieri, natural kickboxer, made the transition. Holly Holm, natural boxer, made the transition. Both individuals have fought and lost on those sides. We understand. James Toney lost. You even got guys like Herschel Walker, a football player, going into MMA and winning. You have situations in which Conor McGregor wanted to boxed Floyd Mayweather, lost. Guess what? These things happen. We understand it. But Ben Askren, you are fighting a celebrity who picked up boxing a year ago. And you look like that. I'm sorry. I don't know what they cut you a check for, because I know you was only gonna get like what 500,000, and maybe they cut you like a check for a mill backstage. I'm sorry, but you should have played them. You should have been on some like, hey, I'm gonna throw this fight, but you need to put the funds in my account, because if you don't put the funds in my account, you guys don't get this event. And he should have did that, and then he should have gotten that ring, and he should have beat the shit out of Jake Paul, and then went home with 1.5 and change in his account. That's the way that I look at it. Fuck them. But you, dog, you can't go back to the UFC. And if you do, dog, people are not going to want to see you fight. Not even people want to see you fight. Dana White is probably going to put you in a ring. Well, not a ring, but an octagon. Just to get you out of the way. Dog, where are you going to go from here? At least with Conor McGregor, he was out here putting up a fight against Floyd Mayweather. Obviously, Floyd was toying with him, and we expected that to happen. But Conor McGregor was able to transition back, and honestly, I think that Floyd fight really ruined him, in my opinion, because the conditioning for boxing versus the UFC is totally different. But I think that's what happened more than anything. But you got people like Heather Hardy, who fights full-time in both spaces. And I know she had to be watching this and thinking to herself, this is absolute fucking bullshit. Because she got to fight in both these spaces so that she can make enough money to support herself and her daughter. And then you got people like Ben Askren, someone who the UFC swapped contracts for because the UFC was getting tired of seeing Mighty Mouse basically embarrass the entire division. You put him in the ring with Masvidal, who ends up absolutely embarrassing him, and then you get this opportunity, and you would think like, oh, this should be easy money. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the betting odds, I'm like, yo, these motherfuckers are stupid. And then I see this shit. First round KO. With fucking boxing gloves on. They're not even bare knuckle. Jake Paul can't even really fucking throw a punch still. I don't get it. I can understand Nate Robinson, because Nate Robinson isn't a boxer. He's a basketball player. But Ben Askren, over 10 years of combat experience. Showing up, out of shape, getting knocked out by a fucking YouTuber. I can't understand that. And yeah, whatever sort of notoriety or image that you were trying to build, or marketability, dog, everybody's gonna laugh at you for now. Not because you lost to Jake Paul, but you are a combat fighter with over 10 years experience that has fought way tougher opponents, and you let a fucking YouTuber embarrass you for the sake of getting paid. Whew. Well, that's going to wrap it up for me. I hope you guys enjoy this. If you guys have any questions, any comments, please leave them below. If you have the time to, it would be very much appreciative if you were to like and subscribe to the channel. I will do my best to drop every Sunday just to keep this thing going. And I hope everybody else has a wonderful rest of their Sunday. For those of you who are in the areas that are being affected by the situations that have been happening with these mass shootings, please be safe. Please be aware of your surroundings. And anytime something just doesn't feel right with you, please, 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 please do not stick around to find out if it is. All right, y'all. I'm out of here.